Hello, my friends. It's your host, Phil Larson, and this is your motivational high five on change. Let's do this. Hello, greetings, and welcome to another episode. I'm going to get right into it. I was hoping to get an episode out before the end of May, but something happened that relates to this episode on change. On May 20th, my son had a freak accident, and it required some stitches that later, after finding an infection, realized there was a deeper issue that needed tending to, and he went into emergency surgery. This happened just a few weeks before we were going to go on vacation home to our home states where both my wife and I have family. We were going to travel around the state and visit family as we do around every summer. And our son Dax was super excited to see his cousins, especially, that he hadn't seen in a while. And it was my son's last week of kindergarten. He had 3 days left. And after the surgery, the surgeon came to my wife and I in the middle of the night and said he needed probably about 7 days of recovery in the hospital. This would go on to cancel our time away to see family. And my son, who was very happy and excited to spend the last few days of kindergarten with students and teachers who have become his best friends and mentors. My son, who goes fully in, he wanted to experience all there was to experience. That was the rest of his kindergarten. My son, he is beautiful and fully aware of everything and wants to be all in with all of his emotions, and he had to give that up. And we had to see his sadness. He had to miss the rest of his kindergarten, and he had to miss his vacation home. And we all that week experienced quite a shift, quite a bit of change. And it was not easy, and it's not easy still, but it's getting easier as things begin to kind of settle down and go back to kind of a normalcy. But now we're in the summer and the schedules are just kind of messed up. But one thing that I've been reminded about change, things that I've known before, but I'm reminded of, that change upends, it surprises, and it knocks us off balance. I've never been a big fan of it, to be honest. And when this happens, we wake up or come into awareness of a few things. We come into awareness of our comforts that we had before, our plans that are often thwarted, and our need and desire for equilibrium, for balance, for normalcy, to get back into routine. And when we get back to balance, when we get back into something that feels somewhat like normalcy again, we experience the true blessing of change. It doesn't feel that way, but in hindsight, it's the blessing. The blessing is that things are not exactly what they used to be. Well, how's that a blessing? We now have new experience that we didn't have before, experience we can draw on for the rest of our lives. Things that people can go, oh, you've been through that. I have been through that too. What was your experience? What did you learn from it? Our normal, when the dust settles, it starts to feel like normal, is actually not the old normal. It is a new normal. We have indeed been changed. One of my favorite daily devotional spiritual books is called Nightlight by Amy E. Dean. And actually today's date in this book fits this perfectly. It starts out with a quote from Robert Frost. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. And this is the rest of today's reading from Nightlight. If we've ever dug in a garden and unearthed an ant's nest, we can recall their first reaction to our unintended destruction. They do everything possible to save their lives and supplies. The ants scurry around, moving the larvae to an underground room. Exposed contents are then relocated to unseen passages. In a matter of minutes, the ants are again safely underground and ready to resume their daily routines. How do we react when some catastrophe or unplanned event occurs? Do we want to crawl under a rock, or are we as resilient as the ants? Instead of moaning over postponed plans or the loss of something in our lives, we can try to be like the ants and learn how to best work with circumstances that come our way. Life doesn't stop for us to lick wounds or add fuel to grievances. Hours pass, we grow older, nature continues. Every event is part of life's cycle. We can't run away from anything. We must meet life head on and adjust to its ebb and flow. Friends, that's a hard truth right now. I want life to stop so we can lick our wounds and add fuel to our grievances. This is something that I really struggle with as someone who's always been resistant to change. It's much easier for life to stop, for us to take the time we need to come to grips with reality. And you can do that. That is important. In fact, it needs to happen alongside of life moving on. And that's kind of what makes it so hard, is life doesn't stop. And we do need to lick our wounds to some degree. But how does a wound heal? We let it be. We cover it up. We make sure that it's like clean and all that stuff, but we don't bother it. We don't mess with it. We let it do what it does, and we continue on. And eventually when the dust settles, here's again the blessing of it all. We can see that our foundation has shifted, right? So like for instance, when we dug the hole into the ant's nest and the dust settles, the foundation has shifted. What you thought was normal is no longer that way. We notice our scars, that there's disturbance of the dirt in our lives, maybe the injuries on our skin, the scars on my body, that I got to now show my son and recall the days those happened and tell him the stories behind them and the stories of healing that he is experiencing and will also continue to experience in his life. When we see those scars and we remember, we are reminded of who we were, while at the same time, since life is moving on, we are waking up and coming into awareness of who we are becoming. And that is the blessing of change, that life does move on, that we are not the same, that the normal is now a new normal. And the great blessing of change is that we can look back on it with appreciation. And that is so easy to do in hindsight. And I wonder if true enlightenment comes from learning to appreciate change while it is happening. And I hope to someday be that person. Maybe it is who I am becoming. Maybe it is who you are becoming. But it is impossible to become that person without experiencing it. The struggles and the frustrations of the change. Being upended and surprised, being knocked off balance, and having our plans thwarted. And with every new change, every new experience that happens, maybe we are one step closer to appreciating it while it is happening, to say thank you for this upending. Because as we look back and we remember our history of change, we can find encouragement in that we have survived, and that, not just that, we have learned from it. We have become better from it. We have thrived. My friends, another end to the podcast, another opportunity to welcome change into our life. If you've been a listener of this podcast for a long time, ultimately, especially at the end, we welcome change. We ask for it. How do we do that? By welcoming a new mantra that counteracts the negative narratives in our life. It welcomes in neuroplasticity, the ability for our brains, the wiring of our brains, the neural connections to change and to move in a new pattern, a new direction, and create a new normal. And we do that by finding a reflection of ourselves and saying the following positive affirmation or mantra. And it works. We've talked about this in the past, and a lot of you are still here because, hey, this has been helpful. I'm glad you're here. It's been helpful for me too. And today, when you find a reflection of yourself, will you say this? Today, I am thankful for change, as it is a pathway to who I am becoming. Friends, remember, the most rewarding paths taken, the most rewarding hikes to the top of the mountain are not the easiest, but the hardest, are not the shortest, but a little longer than that. Your life is worth the adventure. The adventure requires change. Embark on that path with confidence because you've done it so far. History says that you are better for it, that you are growing from it, that you are who you are today, seeking and listening to a self-help podcast, asking yourself the hard questions, wanting to improve and get better because of the change you've gone through. You've used it to push you forward. Now, you're never meant to do that alone. Involve community, involve counseling, which I've said in other podcasts. We have a partnership with an online counseling service called BetterHelp. BetterHelp, HELP.com/YMH5 will get you 10% off your first month. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But there are opportunities to not do it alone. But take that first step, or the next one that seems harder, and it maybe seems like the first. Maybe it feels like you're back at the beginning. You're not, because of all that's come before. But it may feel that way, and that's okay. The thing is, no one can do the step for you that gets you in the right direction, but people can come alongside you and support. But ultimately, that step says, come on, change. It welcomes it in. Go on the adventure. You can do it. It starts with you.